It's working its way through the pipes. We don't have to talk about it now. It's recording.
What are you
Tell us more
with?
about what we were just talking about.
No, we don't have to talk about it. We should.
See my shirt? This will cheer you up.
Oh, Mr. David.
I've like disabled your video. Hold on.
It's Larry David.
I love it.
Yeah.
Birdman.
I realize the recording won't have any of the video, but
That's fine. It's good to look at each other.
We'll just describe things for people.
yeah.
So the giant swastika behind your camera, Rob, I was just curious, is that
it's an art piece.
It's an art piece. It's my heritage. You can't tell anything.
My heritage.
Well, we could get into that, but I don't want to start off on that.
Get into your Nazi heritage?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. I'm down to talk about it. Let's go.
Yeah. My blonde hair, blue-eyed background, as you can see clearly.
See, if we don't describe you, everybody on the podcast or everybody listening would think that you were that.
I kind of like that though.
Well, what do I sound like? You know,
you sound to me. You sound exactly how you look, but that's just been for so long.
I've never really thought of that. I've never really thought about like what do you sound like.
There's a timbre to your voice that adds melanin to your appearance, I think.
Yeah. I think there's a way someone, if they're discerning enough, it can like pattern seek as well as like Jack can. You can be like, yeah, that's basically someone with melanin, and then you could just hear them talk.
People tell me that I sound like a gamer black guy or just fat, and I am both of those things.
Yeah.
As far as they know.
As far as they know, but there's a certain weight to your voice if you're tall or big, which I'm both. So like it adds like something to it. But also they say apparently when you turn, I heard this recently, that when you turn 30, there's a percentage of guys that have a second puberty. So they like the guys who like have like radio voices, like those really deep, not like comically deep, but really like almost chocolatey voices. They have like a second puberty where their voice changes. It changes a second time. There's a guy called Pirate Software on YouTube. He has really good content. And he has he talks about that. He's like, people are like, how do you get that voice? He's like, dude, let me show you a clip from when I was like 24. And he sounds like, hey guys, how you doing? I'm just here to do some And then like he shows him now. He's like, hey everybody, I can't do his. He has this very like I guess the best way to say is radio voice. But it's insane.
Are there any studies on that and like why that happens? Is it like actually another puberty?
Well, that's like the quarter life crisis point where a lot of people in like the 27 to 30, that's where I think a lot of people face like a quarter life crisis. And I think even in our own experiences, we could probably say
it just causes your body to go into overdrive or something where it's like in panic mode.
Yeah, I mean, from a astrological sense, it's the same time that Saturn is in. It's called the Saturn return, or just your quarter life crisis. That's where
I need to know what the CDC. I need to know what the CDC says. I'm not interested in that.
Well, what the CDC says probably that male brains usually stop developing around 25, 26. Mm-hmm. And then probably from that stage onward, I'd imagine that's when you're like a male is experiencing like full, in a sense, consciousness of like himself, like finally his brain's complete. You know, the download is complete. So then it's like
all the neural pathing's pretty much done. Aside from like neural pathing when it comes to like learning a skill, aside from that, pretty much everything else in terms of like who you are is pretty fixed.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
It's funny how many people I know that's like got their shit together at around 25, 26, like including pretty much. Yeah,
it's noticeable around 27, 28 because that's when a lot of things kind of like.
Well, I think when you realize, oh shit, this is who I am, and it's like once you learn what skill set you have and how to implement it. Really, that's what it seems like.
Yeah, a lot of social pressure too. I think that probably like pushes
quarter life crisis. Yeah, for millennials, it's a quarter life crisis because we're expected to know where we want to be at like 21.
Yeah, and I think that's in a way a psyop for men, especially to grow up. Like, wait, I know it's like, yeah, you got to grow up. Yeah, they were having kids at 15. See, they were grown adults and stuff like
Because
that.
I was
But
middle aged back then.
yeah, it was like those were the dark ages, like, of course. Like,
Yeah.
but if you think about it, and like from the historical standpoint, people weren't really considered like the Jubilee or your 50th year. That's when you really turn into an adult at that point, or like
Abraham
50,
Lincoln.
52.
Abraham Lincoln's autobiography, they talked about how like it actually wasn't expected for rural working class Americans to leave the home until you're 23, 24, because you're expected to work at home and help farm or something. So 23, 24, that's when they're like, all right, go find a woman who's not either dead or married yet.
Yeah, now we're playing Fortnite till we're 28.
People are like 30. People are like 35 and they're like, do I want to have kids? It's like, which is fine. I mean, my aunt and uncle did that, and it worked out for them. But like, I mean, some people really are like, I know a guy who's 39, and like, and it's fine in a way.
39 or 29?
39. I'm 29. It's like it's kind of.
Men are on a slower clock. I mean, they're also like.
Well, you can have kids at 50 as a guy. You just
but also a lot of guys are like they want to have energy for their kids. You don't want to be 70 and raising a 15-year-old. Yeah, because if you have teenagers and you're 70, it's like people who are in their 40s struggle with teenagers because they just don't have the energy to keep up with them. And it's like you're 70. It's like you might as well just have somebody else raise your kid at that point because you're just going to struggle unless you're like a physical specimen and you're just like in the zone. Which a lot of these guys who are having kids at that age are because they have the systems around them and like the financial well-being to do it.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I mean, it's one part where on the other end, the partner that most men seek are females, and they are in the height of their maturity in terms of like their eggs being, high success chance for a healthy child is not in the 40s or 50s. It's like late 20s, 30s, and that's about it. So I know that a lot of people feel pressured even from that standpoint to be like, okay, well, if I want to have healthy kids, I got to like rush all these other things. And I think they don't need to accomplish all these things. That's probably, in my opinion, also another kind of psyop on a lot of people, like what's required to have a child. And it brings me back to a conversation we had about like, is a kid expensive? I'm like, depending how you view it. So it's like,
like Jeff Bezos doesn't think the kids are expensive because he can afford to raise one with like the money he makes in a quarter second.
That's because that's how he views life.
Yeah. You just think about money differently once you hit a certain point. Like, I've had that same argument too. It's just expensive is relative. Like people are like, oh my God, food, this is so expensive. That's so expensive. It's like, you're saying kids are expensive because of your financial situation. And it's an unpopular opinion, but a lot of people who say kids are expensive, I think that they should have maybe like, they should think about their financial situation and like, was this the exact right time? And a lot of people I think will willfully tell you like, yeah, we weren't ready for kids. I don't think anybody's ever really like totally ready. And I don't have kids, so I could just be talking out of my ass here, but like,
that's what every parent says. It's like, you're never ready.
Yeah. And I'm watching it firsthand with my brother and his wife, like going through that right now. They're raising a kid and it's like, their first kid, it's like you don't know anything. You can read and like figure some things out, but you're never going to be fully ready. And but they were like, they worked on their financial well-being to like get to a point where, okay, we're comfortable. We know that we can afford this. Like, we're not going to have any surprises. Let's, you can kind of get things going then. But I think a lot of people just front load it and they feel that societal pressure, especially women, where they're like, I'm in my late 20s, early 30s, I got to get going. And, I think that it kind of goes back to a conversation we had about the corporation and like how they kind of trick women into thinking that they are going to be just like men and that they should have this career. But it's like once they get in their early 30s, they realize that the corp is like really unfulfilling and they're on that biological clock. And I think a lot of people have a freak out when that happens.
It's kind of depressing. It's like such a big lie too. It's like, again, it is unfair in a way that we get this opportunity to focus on our careers and we're able to get fulfillment from it. But every guy most who aren't psychopaths will say the reason I work hard in my career is so I can have a family. And a lot, like, I mean, it's kind of the meme of like, there was one, the meme where it's like, would you be a stay-at-home dad if your wife made 10 million a year? And the guy immediately is wearing a maid outfit sweeping the floor. It's like, the reason we do all this is for the family. Yes, there's prestige and it's nice to have like respect if you're high up in your career, but it's all amenities. It's all just, it's like an appetizer for the main meal, which is the fruitfulness of having children, family, legacy. So it's just, I don't know. It's kind of, I sympathize with women, but it is so fucked up that they kind of get lied about. Like, no, fuck family. Don't ever do any of that. It's meaningless. Serve a corporation, become partner, work 80 hours a week. Nothing matters except money. It's like, then they're like, there was a story of a woman I read who was like a biotech executive or something, and she was like 45 and she froze her eggs, and she's like, they're like, well, you can't have kids anymore. She's like, okay, well, it's okay, I froze the eggs, and all of them failed. They were all like severe Down syndrome. They're all ruined, and she was like, I was fucking lied to and told that this was like the way to do it. And her, she's like, my life is. I mean, I think the follow up is that she eventually adopted and was able to do it, but like, I mean, she very much was set on she wanted her own kids, and it's, I mean, that was horrifying to read because she wasn't like she wasn't obnoxious about it. That was just that she was raised in that environment and told pursue career. That's above everything else. Kids will come second. Then she's like, but I did all this so I could have the kids. And yeah, I don't know. I think you're right. It's a fucking psyop. It's a big lie by like some guy wearing like dressed as the Monopoly man, smoking a cigar.
Yeah.
I just yell Edward Bernays every time.
Yeah, exactly. Edward fucking Bernays.
Well, it's like, how do you get people to start smoking cigarettes and wearing trousers?
It's empowering for women to smoke cancer sticks.
So, I mean, it's just applied to different things, I think. And that's how you get a really highly intelligent, hardworking workforce is these promises. And the payout is usually there, but I think the cost isn't a material one at that point. You're like costing your youth, your energy, and probably like experiences that you'll never get a chance to have if you're putting like the job first all the time. But I think if you balance it, you can do better on both. And like, I think,
and you have no equity. You have nothing to show for it except for money at the end of the day.
Yeah.
You have the money in the 401k and like health benefits while you have the job. But like, as soon as you leave, that's all gone. Mm-hmm. So you have to just keep working for that. And you can't go and start a family. You can, but it's going to be tough to raise the kid on your own. Like, I've seen firsthand how difficult it is on people to raise a kid when they are not working a job. Like, I can't even imagine the people who are working full time and raising a kid. There's a ton of nannies around my neighborhood for that reason.
Someone else is raising it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, just during like the middle of the day, like these nannies will just like run around for like 4 hours down to the playground and just raise the kid. It's like, well, mom and dad are working, and you know, a lot of people are just in that situation. It's like you turn from dinks into was it dual income with kids? I guess DIWK, whatever, however you say that, dual income with kids.
Yeah, but I don't think it's going to sound good.
Yeah, yeah, the W is silent.
Yeah. Well, that that kind of takes me back to this being like the New Year's episode and Christmas and like our break, because the movie I saw that I really like relates to this so much and really had me thinking over the break, because I also spent time with family, and I'm seeing my cousin now. I'm just gonna say it, who is just into UBS, the bank. And I'm seeing this prioritization of the job over family a little bit, and there was an issue with that, like that was brought up, and it was acknowledged. But I'm realizing what, at 24, 25, I think she's 20. No, she's 26, 27. So it's like, are you going to choose to kind of prioritize the work life, get all this money, and then you're going to look around? It's like, well, I'm getting blown in a speedboat, but that's about it. Like, in terms of like my experiences, otherwise I was in like autopilot, just working for somebody else. And you're going to miss out. And the movie I saw at that time when we were having this debate was Click by Adam Sandler. And
oh my God, I saw that movie in theaters actually with my first girlfriend. That was that was a trip. Yeah.
Wow. So yeah, I mean that I would really encourage you guys if I would even rewatch it. Like a nice rewatch just kind of takes me to like Severance a little bit because he like
Yeah.
goes to Bed Bath and Beyond and he's an architect and I wanted to be an architect and I was an Adam Sandler stan at the time. So I feel like I really related to that. And he was like, "Oh yeah, let me just fast forward through the arguments. Let me fast forward through the work presentation, working on the like overnight. All right, and then the remote, like reality, works off patterns. So it started to learn his patterns, his behavior. Oh, he just wanted to fast forward and go on autopilot. So he couldn't even control like the autopilot anymore. And so he pretty much just like woke up like a fat fuck like at 7 years old.
Isn't Christopher Walken the guy who gives him the remote?
Yeah,
movie?
which is
God.
so it's such an awesome movie. I was like, this is low key a gem. It's I know it's a comedy first and foremost, but the message in it is like
it is
so deep.
Yeah, I never thought about the plot of that. Like, I never really like grasped it. I mean, I was 14 when I saw it, so I'm like, I just didn't have any frame. But
my sister put it on, of all people, and I was like, you know what, I'll watch it. So,
dude, Adam Sandler's got like, I mean, I know he just makes like kind of joke movies, but he's an icon. Like, he's created some of like the most impactful movies. Yeah,
he made movies that were accessible and people shit on it for it. It's like, so you didn't like the fart jokes in it. It's like
everyone does.
Everyone in between New York City and LA, everywhere in between those two shitholes knows him as an icon. And he is. That's why he's worth like, I don't even know if he's a billionaire yet, but he's close.
Well, he's the Netflix signed him to what 10 movies like ahead of time. Like how many people, how many actors get that?
Like just keep pumping him out, dude. He doesn't care. He's like, yeah, okay, I'm gonna gather my best friends in life. We're gonna make a movie where some hot actress is gonna pretend to be my wife, and then we're just gonna make billions of dollars off these movies, and that's it.
He was talking about like the Grown-Ups movies and like why it was so fun is because they basically just on vacation with all their friends and family, just making a movie like, but they're in this like vacation spot, so it's just you're just on a year-long vacation basically.
And I realized that's kind of like the trick in the way, like that's why he's so successful. And you know, I saw a clip on Twitter of Adam Sandler and Don't Mess with the Zohan, and that kind of relates to everything that's going on right now.
Oh my God, that movie hits hard when you see it now.
Oh, okay. So, I don't want to talk about Israel Palestine anymore, but I would love to watch the Zohan and comment on it.
We should because I only saw a clip. I'm like, this is just like pure like just propaganda in some ways, but it's like it's a great movie by Adam Sandler.
Isn't there a Hamas agent played by like a really respected actor? Fuck,
yeah, he's the bald one. Is he the bald one? Who's in Iron Man? Oh, maybe not.
Oh, he's in Iron Man though. It's not him though. You don't mess with the Zohan.
Yeah,
well, I actually need to know.
Yeah, we gotta know this.
It's a John Turturro, who's like an Italian, but they're like, yeah, you're Muslim now.
That
John
guy,
Michael Turturro is an Italian. He's half meatball, and they have him play a Hamas agent.
Dude, he's in it's funny we were talking about Chris Walken and him. He's in they're both in Severance together.
Yeah, that's why
they have a love and I'm not gonna spoil it.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
He's the butler in Mr. Deeds.
They're all. Don't you see? They're all just in the same like production company. I feel like they're just like, all right, let's just go to page 10 of VeggieTales. I'm still on the VeggieTales kick right now, just for our listeners. I think most
have you been binging it?
No. Like, every movie show is a VeggieTale episode, and so it's like. I feel like these guys who like all kind of share the same movies and production companies obviously are maybe getting inspired about some of the stories that they write for everybody for a modern audience is really what I would say. But so what I wanted to talk about though was New Year's and New Year's resolutions. And the only reason why I brought it up was because Lydia and I were at a coffee shop and this guy who we see him there just as often as we go there. So I don't know if it's a good sign or bad sign. But he's always trying to make conversation with us. His name's I'll call him Paul, just change his name. So
Yeah.
He's asking just like, oh, hey, how's it going? And we're like, hey, it was not much, just coming back from New Year's. And then he asked us about our resolutions, and he's like, you're not resolution people, are you? Kind of like right on our faces when he asked. And we're like, no, not really. Cause, I don't really think that's a great time to start it. And Lydia, give her credit for this. She thought it was like, why would you start a habit in the dead of winter when like spring is just a couple more months away? And that's a more like opportune time to associate good behavior with like good weather and good like new beginnings and things like that, rather than like
vitamin D.
Yeah, and I get it a little bit. It's just the sun solstice, so it's going to get warmer every day now. So that's also an idea of behind like the resolutions, I guess. But I always thought it was a weird thing to do because often it takes 21 days or so to create a habit. And so a lot of people do the gym thing and shit like that. And everything kind of dies down after like March. But
like January 21st is when it all dies down. It takes about 3 weeks. I think what's the saying? It's like 3 weeks to form a new habit and 60 days to solidify it, like to really like solidify it. And that's why it's so hard. But I mean, yeah, it's just gym memberships are built on that. It's the entire model.
So you guys wouldn't have resolutions then because of that?
I had them. I mean, I usually don't do them, but I had this because I was on like several diets. I was on a diet that kind of like faltered. When I got to Thanksgiving, I'm like, it's really hard. The only thing that I struggle with is when I'm around other people, it's hard to maintain it. But like when I'm on my own, I could just stop eating. It's just a matter of like social pressures. And even no one has to say anything. If someone just be in the room, I'm like, mozzarella sticks? Then it's over.
Yeah.
But no, my family wanted to do dry January, and it's like it is kind of a weird arbitrary because we consider it the beginning of the year, that's the only reason. It's like, I mean, this is a weird thing, but this is all I could think of is like girls in high school when they say they only want to lose their virginity on either the 18th birthday or on prom night because it gives it some kind of meaning. And like I remember as a guy in high school hearing that and being like, "That's the stupidest fucking thing I've ever heard." Because like as a guy,
you're still syncing your calendar up though, right?
No, I mean, yeah, sort of. I mean, I was just, because as a guy, I literally, I remember a girl said to me, like, you will say anything just to get laid. I'm like, that's not true. And even I could literally imagined a little version of me in the back of my head, like in the back of a classroom being like, you're so full of shit.
Well, that's what you would say is that's not true.
Well, it's like,
I'm not like other guys.
Because in high school, it's like, that is your only prerogative is like survive, get into a college and somehow get a woman to have sex with you. There is no other, unless, I mean, there's some guys who are in meaningful relationships, which is pathetic to me to do in high school. I'm kidding.
No, I was.
I don't know. It's funny that you realize none of it really matters because it's like, I mean, some of the things that any change I've made in life has never been based on it's the beginning of the new year, it's a new semester, it's a new whatever. It's always internal. It's never some fake bullshit based on it's a new year, new me. I was so set on dry January, and I think literally last Thursday I just was like, time to get wasted. Why not? It's just a completely
it's always some crippling rock bottom that we hit. It's like that's when the meaningful change happens. Is you break yourself down to nothing basically, and then you build yourself back up.
It's never on motivation. It's always on I literally have no other direction to go but up.
Yeah, is the saying. It's like when they interview a prisoner. It's like when did you find God? Around the same time the police found me.
That's a good quote.
That's really funny.
Yeah, I mean,
it's always spontaneous.
That's a hero's journey. I think a lot of males, to kind of tie it to 25 to 30, aren't really experiencing to its fullest effect. And I think a lot of things in society try to encourage people to be comfortable to their own detriment. And that's where you can see, that's where over 2020, I was drinking probably a bottle of whiskey a month. So it wasn't heavy, but I was drinking way more than I normally would. And I would have people over, but I still was clearing a bottle a month, which was a lot. and I picked up a lot of weight and I was eating out a lot. And I was realizing, I'm like, oh, I'm just trying to get comfortable because I'm uncomfortable and I need to like break that. And so I was like, okay, got to shed the weight, got to do all that. Not because it's fucking New Year's Eve or like Martin Luther King's Day, but it's just because I need to do that because I'm at like some proverbial brick bottom.
I mentioned, I think we talked about actually one of our first earlier episodes, but there was a guy talking about the failure of modern therapy now is that we try to treat men the same way we treat women, which is women typically is, I mean, it's just in a very gross generalization, but women need to feel, they want to feel loved and they want to feel safe in order to be treated like mentally or emotionally. Men need to feel useful and they need to feel powerful. They need to feel like they have a purpose. I mean, not saying women don't need a purpose, but typically that's when we see this kind of crisis of men now. Where like in therapy, people are like, I don't know, we don't know how to treat them. Why are these skyrocketing suicide rates, skyrocketing like disillusionments? And it's like, because none of these guys have any sense of like power or strength to themselves that they need. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's not a coincidence that we're not really at war right now. And we have this suicide epidemic. Like war gives men a purpose, like for better or worse. Or it's very easy to glean something from that for a lot of men. Wow. It's like your entire personality, like war veterans, it's like their entire personality is like that's where their whole life was. Like when they go back home, it's why a lot of them, like we have a really high suicide rate among veterans is because like they go to war and they're like, that was my purpose. Now what? Like I can't socialize with people. I have nothing in common with people. The people you talk to on a daily basis haven't seen their friends die in their arms or like seen just horrific, just war crimes or whatever. It's a tough come down.
Absolutely. I mean, I mentioned I watched the movie The King's Man last night or the night before. Are you guys going to see that? Or can I spoil a little bit of it? Because
is that the World War One?
It's really good, and you might be convinced.
The one with Rasputin in it. I'll take your word for it. You can spoil it though. That looked like.
Honestly, it's actually really close. It's really close to actually what happened to in World War One. I'm telling you. But anyways, like the hero's son, Ralph Fiennes, Voldemort. He's like the co-main character with his son. So in the beginning of the movie, it's like 1902. Interesting. It starts in 1902 in South Africa. There's a war going on. His wife dies. His son's like, oh, and then he grows up a little bit. World War One's about to go off, and his son is like, well, I need to have a purpose. I want to join like the regiment, like the British fighting in the trenches. I want to like pretty much go die. Because the dad was like a secret agent or some shit, but he promised the mom like on her deathbed not to like put his son in any more war or violence because he saw like the horrors of that. And what it did to those people in 1902, it was like a concentration camps that were going on in South Africa at the time. So that they were like, okay, don't expose my son. So he didn't expose his son to the Kingsman organization, and he would refute him from doing anything. He was trying to protect them. World War One starts to break out. You see the Rasputin thing. You see all these guys and all the worm tongues basically go to each of the monarchs at the time, and then also the Black Hand and pretty much start World War One from that. There is some historicity to that, but the point is the son's like, oh, I need purpose because the dad sheltered him so much. He wanted to go fight in like the war. And so then he even like leveraged King George to put his son in like the officer school, like right as he was about to deploy. But then he switches like uniform with like some other Scottish guy. And then he gets sent right to the front lines, and he's just like, I need to have some purpose. I need to have an experience, even though his dad was trying to save him from like the horrors of that. And that's something we see now. You're talking about with like soldiers, like just men today don't have purpose because they're so sheltered. So they need to go seek it out in like some war or some kind of wardom, and to have like a common enemy to rally around. Because I think there's a lot of divisiveness anyways.
Yeah. It's kind of why we're fighting each other right now, like this culture war. There's a lot of men on either side, and they're kind of like, they view this as their conflict, as like, I can't go off to a war and actually fight a war, fighting a proxy war in Ukraine and like soon against Iran, probably the way things are shaping up.
I think a lot more guys would go over if our population was healthier, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah,
If
yeah.
obesity wasn't rampant, I really think there'd be a lot more dudes in Ukraine.
Yeah, and I mean, some of the it's chicken and the egg too. It's like we also would have a lot healthier of a population if more people were interested in going to war. Like if more people were interested in joining the military, like for that reason, because then you have to get in shape.
With Iraq, we just too many of us saw what a pointless waste of time it was. I think.
Yeah.
At least that's why I mean, there were times when I really considered like, should I just, when I wasn't in school and I wasn't working, I'm like, should I just fucking throw myself at the French Foreign Legion or something, or just even like just do something with it? And then I was like, well, one, no, do I really want to die for an oil company, or do I want to die for some Illuminati bullshit movement trying to start shit? And I don't know. It's just there's a certain point I think I think the disillusionment with war, I think also, you were saying, kind of contributes to this whole epidemic almost. But does it need to be conflict sometimes? I wonder if you could even, I mean, we didn't have a war. Oh, I guess we had the Korean War, but like after World War II, people found fulfillment just in building society. But
because they knew the horrors of war.
But we are all I don't know. It feels like there's almost this disillusionment with even building society. There's not much, at least as much motivation to do anything, because it's like, well,
that's a conflict. Sorry, that's a conflict with nature. Like for man, it's like it's supposed to be this like driving force, and that's why like a lot of great men build a lot of great things, is because they view this as like, I'm going to overcome nature that's against me. That's like this monolith that is so much bigger than me, but I'm gonna like make it my bitch, proverbially, basically. Like I think that as society grows, we're getting a smaller and smaller amount of people that are building great things, but they're moving the needle so much more because of technology. Like it takes Elon Musk, and obviously he has like a lot of like people under his company, but he's like one guy, and we're kind of, a lot of people are like kind of relying on him for like space travel. Like our own government is relying on him to get to space now. So we're just, as society gets bigger and bigger and more comfortable, it's like, I think there's this unspoken thing of like, oh, he's got it, he'll handle it, like we kind of think somebody has the wheel.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know.
It is funny and maybe a coincidence. Right now, I forgot the closest window in the back next to your photos, the Tower of Babel, and Nimrod is right there inspecting it. It's an old Peter Bruegel's
Tower of Babel's the language thing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, where like man built so high, like man always tries, and then what happens is a separation of languages and cataclysm. And that's something I think was known in the past, like when we should study times of peace and what were men at the time learning and disseminating. Because I think a lot of like what we learn in high school, even elementary school, is like about war and all the horrors of it, but not about peace and what you could achieve through building things and cooperation. So I think a lot of people are always thinking war is in the back of their mind and they know it's wrong, but it's still ever present. And so it allows for the opportunity for it to happen at any moment once the right buttons are pushed.
Yeah. Do you think that that's something that is ingrained in our DNA, or is it something that is just persisted through propaganda?
I don't think it's mankind's nature to be violent. I don't. It takes me so, and this takes me to I love 2001 Space Odyssey intro, because they equivalent in the first intro of that movie. I don't know if you guys remember, like the apes are sitting around like peaceful with the other
they
apes.
Get pushed off by apes, yeah.
And they're all chilling. And then what changes to the environment? This monolith, this Tower of Babel. And then the apes touch it, and then they start warring with one another. And then they smash like the skull at the end, and they throw it up, and then it blends to a space station. And it's like, it's exactly what we see today. Is just, obviously, I don't think it's mankind's nature to be like that. But there's a third, I think, in my personal opinion, a third element here that maybe pushes mankind. So I would say propaganda. I would say propaganda. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, to me, man's nature is what he is now. and it's not necessarily what he was. So like man's nature, if men have been this way for a while, you know, I don't know what the timeline is, but I would call it like human nature to be violent because we've been violent for so long. Like at some point you sort of lose the like what started it, I guess, and it becomes your nature in a way. Does that make sense?
But why do we work towards peace then? Right? If that was true, why wouldn't we just always form like a warrior culture instead of always kind of? I mean, the pinnacle of every society always leads to peace, like art, and like you know what they call decadence. Like people, non-warriors. It's usually war. Like it's almost war just becomes this sort of tool. Like before we discovered farming, all we did was pick berries and kill things, allegedly.
Yeah, I think that. So our nature is to be violent, but our what we have become as humans, like what we are striving towards now is peace, because we are trying to think of how to say this. We kind of advance as a society and like we want to keep it. Nature is kind of the baser instinct. Nature is like if things break down to like the most basic level of my survival, I'm going to be violent. That's what nature is to me. And that's more of like something beyond nature we're getting to, I guess. Like we've kind of subverted a lot of our natural proclivities.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, this might be an unpopular opinion, and this is why I love Barbie so much. So I probably shouldn't have said this to begin with, but we see like a patriarchal society and a matriarchal societies. And obviously, the patriarchal are way more warlike than the matriarchal. If we look at the historical record, that's all like the case. There's a good book called The White Goddess by Robert Graves, and he goes into the details about that. But that's not to say men are to blame for that, but it's the way men interact with one another versus maybe how women interact with one another. And it's easier to go to blows with men than it is for women.
So I actually thought that there was a stat on this. I could never find it, but I saw it somewhere. Where it's like throughout history, there's more wartime per year when women are the leader than men. And I don't quote me on it, but it was a really interesting thought. I was like, why is that?
Why would that be? Totally opposite of what I read, so I definitely need to see that.
Yeah, I'll have to find it. But
it could also be wars of like, I mean, what
are you talking about? Like Queen Victoria in a patriarchal world still? Because they still were. It's still patriarchal in that way.
Yeah, sure. I mean, they're obviously like in the sea of like. There's never been a time where like the world was. I mean, at least we don't know of where the world was like ruled by women. But I don't know. I mean, I would think that would be a pretty major driving factor.
A lot of women prime ministers in Europe right now too. I think most of them are.
No, there have been times, say like 2,000-3,000 BC, where a lot of matriarchal societies, and I mean, Mongolians are like.
I don't think Cleopatra's in charge. Mostly it was wars against people trying to kill her. It wasn't like she was out there like trying to impose rule. It was her fighting for survival for her defense, because she had her brother, husband. Anthony, right? Yeah, it was civil wars caused by Rome's involvement in their affairs.
Yeah, so this might be a good topic to get into, anyways, and to like research more about, because it's been a minute since I looked into that. But another book that I really love is like the Greek myths, and he begins with like the early Grecian societies. A lot of them were matriarchal, in fact, and that's why there was often there were skirmishes, but the amount of the kind of war was different, and like goddess worship versus like a god worship, because that's what is I think the driving factor in a lot of wars in history, because religion like was dominant up until only last 200 years. I think only until then most people were under some denomination. So we have to like consider like the worldview was entirely different in terms of like, well, there's a male god. Well, that wasn't always the case. There was like goddess worship at a point, and then that's when societies were a little bit different. So that's where I'm like, I think that's where the things change, where that's where more violence came. That's where we learn in the Bible of like, oh, Cain slaying Abel. There is a historical moment where like the first murder happened because that had to happen at one point. So
Yeah.
something happened at that point to allow mankind to like, well, maybe to have grown ego, see uh, individuals as separate, and then maybe that's the moment where someone's like, okay, violence. But I don't think man, like maybe now, but maybe because we were pushed into that direction because of all the programming, like solar worship, communism, democracy, like all these different ideologies are totally made up that were
Yeah.
mostly created by men that has always been the cause for how many people have died in World War II? Like over like 30, 50, 60 million. Like
I mean, it's maybe
Worldwide,
100
yeah.
over.
worldwide. I mean,
I would argue
have we had
100.
that many deaths like in history before?
No.
Yeah, I think it's like I mean, throughout history, like all time, I think the estimate is that 100 billion people have ever lived, and 8 billion are alive now.
Yeah.
Like 92 billion people have died.
Genghis Khan was the one who killed about 10 or so million.
Yeah.
That's not even the amount that died in Europe.
Dude, I heard Tamir the Lame had 50,000 skulls like in a fucking throne, like in Warhammer or something, like in front of his palace of like all the conquered peoples, because like they spanned all of Russia and like Asia.
I mean, oh, the Mongols?
Yeah.
Oh, I mean, they went from pretty much like the borders of Francia or France all the way to Korea. I mean,
Yeah,
that's,
and
that's
it
insane.
was debated until recently because they found even Mongolian relics in like Poland that he was telling me about.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
So-
Poland was like the battleground. That was kind of like Eastern Europe was like pretty much the. Remember the Riverlands in Game of Thrones? They were pretty much that. Like you were on one side or the other, and it was constant fighting.
Wow.
It was tough. I've been watching a lot of history about the Mongol Wars there, and it's like it's my new Napoleonic Wars. It's gonna suck up a lot of my time, but
It's
it's
some
terrifying.
good stuff.
You know, I mean, this is a side note, but you know, the Mongols, the warriors, they were so. I don't know how to put this. They were so revolting because literally they would wear animal skins that would rot off them. They said you could almost tell a horde was coming from the smell.
Oh yeah.
Jesus, just like the wind patterns carrying.
Yeah,
it.
you just carry
Oh.
nothing but unwashed babies and rotting like skins. It wasn't until they became wealthy that they were like, "Oh, we can actually afford nicer clothes now." After like the second emperor, after Genghis Khan's son, and they started like, "Okay, we should buy better armor, we should buy clothing, silks and linens." But before then, the first armies were comprised of men wearing rotting skins. They would carry diseased in camps and use them as ammunition and to throw them over walls.
Yeah, because and I was put on to I again because my scholastic learning was I thought all Mongols were Mongolian. Most of the Khans were actually like Viking and red haired or blonde.
What?
Yeah, Tamir the Lame was described to have been like 6'7", with like red hair, long blonde like
Tamir,
hairs.
which one is he?
Tamir the Lame.
Who's that?
One of the Mongol leaders of the Golden Horde in like 1400.
Like
maybe.
after Genghis Khan established?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So yeah, but I think like Genghis Khan had blonde hair. I'm like,
Well,
I'm
I don't
not-
know about that one. Maybe I don't know.
Is that the way to pronounce it, Genghis Khan? I've always heard it
That's how
Genghis
they-
Khan.
they pronounce it Genghis Khan. It's
Oh,
I don't judge people for. I just like to do it the original way because I'm better. But just kidding.
Mhm.
But like that is how they pronounce it, Genghis Khan. But Genghis Khan is like that makes sense in our language. So and they don't care. No, I don't think the Mongolians can be like no. They're just happy you know his name.
I don't know if I've met a Mongolian, so I know.
I have. They're the
I don't know.
coolest people. They're the chillest
Yeah.
people I've ever met. This guy was born next to a motorcycle in a field. And
Wow.
was
Wow.
and like there's a movie they're like Wild West people who do nothing but farm yak milk They're the coolest people, and they're like, I don't care. I told them a story about how we had surgery on one of our dogs, and he was crying, laughing because the idea of using the miracle of modern medicine on a dog was so. He's like, I'm so sorry, I just don't understand. You paid for surgery on a dog, the animals that would eat like our cow shit. He was a very sweet guy though. But yeah, no, they're hardy. They're like Alaskans. I don't know if it's a weird comparison, but they're so hardy. Like
just imagine like a warrior culture that's like wearing furs everywhere.
Well, again, they don't have computers. Most of them, they have like one city. They literally they ride motor. Like there was a movie called Babies. There's a really interesting documentary where it follows like 4 babies across the world. One in San Francisco, one in Japan, one in Africa, and one in Mongolia. And they literally, the mother in Mongolia pops the baby out, they wash it, she hugs it, and then they hop on a motorcycle with their 4 other children and drive 4 hours out back to their farm. It's another world, man. And they're all by the way, the happiest children you'll ever see. There's a video of the Japanese baby. This is kind of a side tangent, but there's a video of the Japanese baby crying uncontrollably because it has so many toys it can't pick one. And it cuts the Mongolian baby, still swaddled, and it's just nibbling on toilet paper and laughing until it's crying. It is having it makes you cry how good that movie is.
Oh man,
the San Francisco baby is like the most hippie parents. They take him to like a seance. They're going, Mother Earth will provide for us. We love the earth. And the baby literally tries to run out of the room because it's scared of what they're doing. It's a really fun. It's a crazy movie.
Do you think babies are naturally afraid of devil worship, or is that like propaganda as well?
What?
like what they're doing to that baby, like doing a seance, basically.
Well, they were doing it pretty much was. They were a weird. Yeah, I think the babies naturally are pure, and I think that baby realized this is some hippie bullshit.
Where were they?
So there was. They kind of showed like 2 babies who were born wealthy and 2 babies born poverty. San Francisco and Japan were wealthy, mostly like upper middle class. And then there was an African baby and a Mongolian baby, and it showed there was literally the mother had like her baby in Africa, and literally she would wipe the baby's ass on her knee, and then would just hold him up by his leg and pick flies off him. And the baby would literally just be sitting in a pond drinking the water and spitting it out.
It says something that it's funny how they achieve a happiness that most Americans will never touch.
Oh yeah, I mean that's what the David Cho. He's a very famous artist who painted. He's famous for painting the mural at Facebook, and they paid him in stock, which that stock ended up being worth like $300 million. And he talks about how he made a documentary going to the Hamza tribe in Africa, and he's like their entire life was waking up in the morning. They would kind of have a little water. They would go hunt, kill an animal, come back, cook, do a dance, tell fart jokes, sleep, and do it all again. And they said there was never a single one of them ever even conceived of being sad. They would mourn the dead, but at one point he said, "You guys are some of the most beautiful people I've ever seen. Can I bring you back to America, have you do modeling, get you paid?" And they're like, I don't understand the concept of a country where people jump off buildings and kill themselves. The notion of suicide was so inconceivable to them because the concept of fulfillment didn't mean anything. Fulfillment to them was there was a day when I caught the biggest elk or caught the biggest zebra and fed the whole tribe, and I got laid, and we had a feast where they chanted my name, and that was it. There's no concept of meaning in their life. They were just happy to be alive. And
it's why simplicity always wins. It's we're really simple people at our core. And those people, they're just it's like time traveling, basically. I'm traveling back to that simpler time where everybody's just well, I caught the biggest elk today. Maybe I'm going to catch an even bigger one tomorrow. They have something to look forward to constantly.
Yeah.
Whereas we kind of achieve things. It's I can DoorDash food. I can have anything at a moment's notice, basically, without almost any effort.
We're concerned for taste. These kids literally, they will jump up trees, reach their hand into honey pots, and just eat honey as they're and their skin is so tough they don't feel the bee stings. I mean, it's a level of there was one moment where he saw them draw these artworks, like these kind of cave paintings that they did, or wrote them on like paper that were. He was like, these are insane. These I could get these in a museum. They're so like incredibly original and beautiful about anthropology. And they showed the parents this because it was the kids who drew them. Like, oh, that's cool. Oh, wow, nice job, kid. And they threw it off a cliff because they're like, what? It doesn't matter. We
don't have a fridge. We don't have a fridge and magnets here.
It was like, oh, that's cool. It's like they're telling a joke. It's like, oh, nice job, buddy. All right, off to a fucking win. Who cares? We got a hunt. Get going. And they were so in tune with everything. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I feel like that's almost required watching for everyone.
I really want to watch that documentary. It was fascinating the way he talked about it.
Oh.
What's it called again?
I don't even know. It's just a guy named David Cho. He talked about it on a podcast, and I'm not repeating it on the podcast. He just described he was with like a 7-year-old kid, and he's like he saw a bush baby, those little like kind of rodents. Like he just found one, shot it out of the air with a little slingshot, broke its legs, snack for later. It's like, oh, a snake, bite its head off, wrap it around its like a belt. And it's like that. That's how in tune with everything he was. Like the forest was like there. I mean, as confidently as you would walk through a city you've lived in your whole life, that's how they walk through the Congo forest with anacondas and leopards and tigers.
Yeah, in a way, I guess that's kind of what Avatar is trying to point out in that way, with Sully kind of realizing there's more to, and I think it's almost a 1-to-1 with like what those people, because the Mongolian people you said were doing seances, right, Jack?
No. It was the San Francisco white people.
Oh, yeah. I thought you were saying the Mongolian.
No. I'm talking about white liberals.
These are white liberals chanting about Mother Earth and Gaia, and the baby was like, this is fucking terrifying, and ran out of the room, and they had to pull the baby back. Mongolia, they were just like, you want some goat milk? And they would squirt milk from the goat into the baby's mouth, and he'd be laughing, like dancing in the milk. They were that. By the way, no one watching the kid. Not a single person watching. They think they had a 4-year-old son who kind of would check on it, kind of poke it, and the baby would giggle, and then he'd lay with him for a bit. And there was a rooster that kept pecking the kid, and literally, I think there's a scene where he grabs the rooster and breaks his neck. It's a great movie. It genuinely makes you want to cry because there's no dialogue. It just shows like the beauty of like babies born all around the world and how they grow up, and they're adorable too. That's the worst part. They all have fat cheeks. They're the sweetest kid. Man.
I mean, whenever I go home,
uterus envy at that point. What?
Whenever I go home, we watch a bunch of fucking movies, and my dad put on a Werner Herzog movie from 1972. So I was having a great time that he was showing me this shit, and it's a Christmas Day movie. It's called Aguirre, Wrath of God. Have either of you seen that?
I only saw like 2000s Werner Herzog. I've never seen 70s stuff.
Yeah. And my dad's just like reading books about him. I'm like, I love this. Like, please tell me more about him. But
Werner Herzog is a national treasure. I love him.
And so he had this guy named Klaus Kinski, and this guy was like, I would say like Mel Gibson a little bit. He was just like nuts on set, and he like threatened to fucking shoot like Werner Herzog and all these other things while filming. But the movie's about
that's filmmaking.
Well, they went to like Peru, and they were on the river, and they were filming like the Spanish conquistadors in 1560 with all the Inca slaves. It was a great movie, really slow. And just like this, how these guys are looking for El Dorado, and all they care about is gold and all this shit. And they're using the natives to find out. And the natives are intentionally leading them astray because they know there's no El Dorado. They know that these conquistadors only care about material things. They don't realize
gold was useless to them, right? They didn't even get gold.
They just have like stuff on their necklace, and like they're like, "Where'd you get this gold? Where'd you get this gold?" And then it's like
I found this in a fucking ditch. I don't know.
Yeah,
they care about potatoes and like spearheads. That was their currency, pretty much, because food was so scarce for them.
Yeah, and I know that they were at war with like the Spanish or like Inca Empire was like faltering at that point, but still, it's very interesting to see how, like in this movie, just depicts all these Europeans or Spanish conquistadors just like kill each other over like this fabled El Dorado. It's an insane movie where like the two main characters just like lose their minds on this river. I won't spoil it. You should watch it, but actually, it was based on a monk's. Yeah, I have. So it was based on a monk's what do you call it? Diary. So
Was he the one that was with Columbus?
no,
I know there was a monk's diary of the guy. Like that's how we
it's
know.
1560.
Oh, okay, that's how we know why Columbus was like so horrible. Was that when he went to the Caribbean and was just murdering and raping? It was some monk being like, "You guys doing great," and he's like, "These fucking guys are insane." And Ghost Comedian's like,
Oh,
"Fucking
man.
bitch."
I could go on a Columbus rant, but I'll say that for my.
Yeah, that was we'll see. It's interesting.
But yeah, so
So Columbus Day special.
yeah.
Indigenous Peoples Day special.
Yeah, either
Call it whatever you
days.
want. I don't care.
He,
That's the one
he wasn't even the
wokeism-
first one. There's at
No.
least like
Oh, several different instances of people
Yeah.
before him. He was just the one that got. But again, that's the psyop because the Italians claimed him. That was like a thing. Columbus Day didn't exist until like what the 1890s.
really.
Yeah, the Italian Americans they wanted to solidify themselves as Americans in our culture. And so what they did was they realized Columbus was like one of the first ones here and he was Italian. So they wrote a falsified like autobiography of him describing him as this like
He's
very-
Italian second, by the way.
yeah, they made him look like Lewis and Clark. And it
Something
showed him
first.
yeah, exactly. And showed him how he came here and he was this great guy. He discovered America. And it was basically like just a way to ingratiate Italians with the American population at the time. And in reality, he was like, no, he's impressive what he did, but he's still like, the guy believed the earth had a nipple. He was like a big proponent of slave. I mean, he did genocide better than most people in World War II, more effectively almost.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they would. I was just
He never
learning
discovered
how,
the Continental. He discovered Cuba. He never came to the U.S.
It was all the other guys afterwards, right? Like kind of mapping
Yeah.
it out afterwards. It was just interesting because I'm like, yeah, well, Vikings knew about it already because there was the Kensington Stone. So at least we know someone 500 years prior to Columbus was there. Because in the Kensington Stone, they talk about it's like runes describing like a battle between the Vikings and like the Native Americans. So there's
Yeah,
interesting
but I mean,
stuff.
Columbus was the first one to write it down for like the quote civilized world. That's
Yeah.
why he's
Yeah.
credited with it. You know, it's like
Yeah,
doesn't really
I-
matter if you found it if nobody knows.
I think it's almost in a way royalty because most of the society at the time still was illiterate and they believed the world was flat, probably because to keep people from knowing about America. So I think a lot of people in higher society knew about it because there's maps depicting parts of the Americas. There's so much historical references that talk about the land with the stone plain with the mountains to the east and west of it. What is that? The Rockies and the
Appalachian.
Appalachians, and that's from a 3,600-year-old manuscript, Egyptian manuscript. So, I think it's been known. I think people just forgot about it.
Yeah, well, I mean, by
Yeah.
the same token, there's people who knew the Earth was round like long before.
Ancient
Columbus.
Greeks did.
Yeah, like
There's
Everybody
the obelisks
didn't-
in Egypt that had it. Yeah.
yeah, it just wasn't maybe as widespread, but you know, there's people who had at least an inkling.
Well, it's
About
like
these
people who,
things.
it's just certain. I mean, back before they didn't have the internet, they didn't have Wikipedia, and even that
Mhm.
Wikipedia is a psyop. But like they didn't have, so it's pretty easy for like, I guess infant knowledge was lost, regained, and people would disagree. I mean, heliocentrism versus geocentrism. I mean, it's
Yeah,
just a matter. You don't. All you have is like papyrus scrolls. And how loud can you talk in the auditorium when you're yelling at the other intellectuals? And that was what the debate, the zeitgeist was. You know what I mean?
because before that, because I was learning the only way that's why temples were everywhere because and inscriptions were on the walls and shit like that. Anyone visiting that city or area would go visit the temple and learn their history, and that's the only place they would have like any kind of literacy or any kind of writing at one point. So that's why you see a lot of stelas in Egypt and like all that. And then, with Alexander the Great, like he compiled a bunch of manuscription texts from the time. So I'm sure they have that information. But of course, we've seen that the lighthouse burned or the library burned down, I think 3 times. So we could say at least 3 times in history we lost a compendium of knowledge. A lot of things, and we still find stuff like the Nag Hammadi Library, and because that gave a lot of context and validation to like stuff in the Bible, and that was only found in 1947. So it's things like that. It's like, okay, so we're still discovering stuff, but with like when you mentioned the internet, Jack, that was, I think, what we could. That's where I think we'll start to really learn things, and because everyone has access, not that they use it to get that information, but now we have access to that, and we have the ability to kind of discern or quote unquote do our own research, even though that was like that term was vilified for like the last 4 years. But like we can just now go learn relatively a lot of the shit on our own. We don't need like some smart ass to tell us anymore.
No, it's a wild time to be alive.
Yeah,
you guys get that.
Wikipedia is a psyop, though.
Yeah.
But it's a good one. It's the best one we got.
It's a psyop that at least, because you could go in the revision section of all the pages and you can see all the changes. So it at least admits to it. So I've had to go. You can see like different names have changed, even like birth dates. It's interesting, and obviously information is obviously malleable. So yeah. I don't know if we'll get anything better than Wikipedia.
Oh, there'll be something. There'll be something.
Got Jason.
Always is.
Twitter.
But anyways,
Jason.
this is our first podcast for 2024,